My name is Claire Ellison, 33 years old. The first time I turned the brass key in the lock of my own house, I felt something snap free inside me. The hinges creaked, the door groaned, and stale air greeted me with a damp, peeling smell. But still, I stood in the middle of that wreck of a living room and whispered, "This is mine." It wasn't much to look at. The listing photos had been so awful they practically begged people to scroll past. Wallpaper bubbled like blisters, a staircase leaned to one side as though the house itself had grown tired, and the yard was so overgrown I half expected to find a lost civilization hiding in the weeds. But the backyard, my God, the backyard. Even in ruin, it looked like freedom. A rectangle of potential under the Colorado sky, a place I could breathe without neighbors pressed up against my walls. Of course, the moment I told my family, they reacted as if I'd announced I was volunteering to be buried alive. It was Sunday dinner. My parents' dining table had been set the same way since I was a child, mahogany polished to a dull glow, crystal glasses that only came out on weekends, and the smell of my mother's pot roast drifting through the house. I waited until dessert plates were cleared before blurting it out. I bought a house. My mother's fork slipped against the china. "Claire, what are you thinking?" She pressed her napkin against her lips like she was hiding behind linen. "You could get a nice condo," Dad muttered, already pulling a pen from his shirt pocket. He grabbed the back of an envelope and began scribbling rough numbers. Mortgage, utilities, hidden costs. Always the accountant, always turning dreams into ledgers. Jake, my younger brother, leaned back in his chair with that infuriating grin he'd perfected as a teenager. "Seriously, Claire? You, of all people, want to play Bob the Builder? Get a condo. You'll thank me later." His wife, Sarah, rolled her eyes so hard I thought they might never return. She didn't bother speaking. Her disdain was loud enough. She had that influencer poise, always calculating angles, making sure the light caught her cheekbones just so. When she looked at me, it wasn't just doubt, it was dismissal. I felt my pulse in my throat. I know what I'm doing. I work with renovation crews every day. I can handle this. No one clapped. No one toasted. Mom sighed. Dad shook his head. Jake chuckled. Sarah scrolled on her phone. And just like that, my victory tasted like ashes. But I signed the papers anyway. The next 6 months devoured me. Every weekend was a construction montage out of some gritty indie film. I scraped wallpaper until my knuckles bled. I spent nights crouched on plywood floors, painting under a single dangling bulb while the wind rattled the loose panes. Some days I questioned my sanity, like when rain poured through a roof leak I hadn't known existed, or when an electrician informed me the entire wiring system was a fire hazard waiting to happen. But there were triumphs, too. The first time I plugged in a lamp and the light actually stayed on. The day the landscapers hacked back the jungle and unearthed a flagstone patio I hadn't known was there. The afternoon, I rolled sod across the backyard and lay flat on it like it was a throne. By the end, the bones of the house gleamed. Fresh paint stretched across walls like new skin. Hardwood floors shone with a warm polish. I had a kitchen that smelled of new oak cabinets and countertops cool as riverstone. For the first time in my adult life, I felt anchored. So I planned a housewarming party. I wanted my family to see what I'd built, to recognize that their cynical eldest daughter could create something worth admiring. I told them one Sunday after dinner. "Next Saturday, 6 o'clock. I'd love for you all to come." Sarah snorted. Actually, snorted. "Why would I want to see that pigsty?" she said, her laughter sharp as broken glass. Heat rushed into my face. I forced a smile. "Well, when you have your own house, you can decorate however you want. Until then, the pigsty's mine." Sarah flushed crimson. The rest of dinner limped along, everyone pretending nothing had happened, though tension coiled like barbed wire under the table. Saturday arrived. My coworkers, neighbors, and friends streamed in right on time. They wandered from room to room, exclaiming over the lighting fixtures, the paint choices, the reclaimed wood shelves I'd installed myself. Their voices swelled with admiration, and for once I let myself bask in it. But my family was nowhere to be seen. An hour ticked by, then another half. My chest ached with the familiar weight of disappointment, until finally headlights swept across the driveway. They entered like reluctant guests at a stranger's wedding, shoulders stiff, eyes braced for disaster. But the moment Mom stepped inside, her expression cracked. "Oh my goodness, Claire," she whispered, hand covering her mouth. "This is gorgeous." Dad nodded slowly, as though he couldn't quite allow himself to be impressed too quickly. You've done good work here. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I scanned the hallway, looking for Sarah. There she was, prowling like a critic at a gallery opening. Her fingers trailed across the banister, checking for dust. She squinted at paint lines, peeked behind a curtain, and finally disappeared upstairs. 10 minutes later, she returned, a smirk curling her lips. The color in your master bedroom is hideous. I'd repaint immediately. She said it loudly, ensuring every guest nearby heard. My jaw tightened. When you have your own house, Sarah, you can paint the walls any color you want, even pink. The room stilled. Everyone knew Sarah's obsession with pink was legendary. Her wardrobe, her phone case, even her car, a bubblegum convertible she flaunted on Instagram. The shot hit its mark. Her face ignited scarlet, brighter than any shade she worshipped. Come on, Jake, we're leaving, she snapped, storming toward the door. Jake cast me a helpless look before trailing after her. My parents followed, shaking their heads, disappointment etched into their features. The party carried on without them, laughter and music filling the spaces they'd vacated. But inside me, a fissure widened. Because as Sarah's heels clicked down my porch steps, I noticed something. The way her eyes had lingered just a moment too long on the bowl by the entry table. The bowl where I kept spare keys. I brushed it off at the time, told myself I was being paranoid. But even then, even in that small, victorious moment, a chill crawled down my spine. Sarah hadn't just been looking for flaws. She'd been looking for openings. And she wasn't finished. The morning after the housewarming, I woke expecting to feel triumphant. Instead, I stood in my kitchen with a half-empty mug of coffee, staring at the scuff marks from where my family's shoes had dragged on the floor. The laughter from my friends still echoed faintly in my ears, but it was muted now, drowned out by Sarah's mocking voice. For a week, silence hung like a curtain between me and the people I was supposed to call family. Then my phone buzzed. It was my mother. Her tone was softer than usual, almost tentative. Claire, could I come by? Just me, no one else. Against my better judgment, I said yes. That Saturday afternoon, she stepped into my home like she was entering sacred ground. Her eyes darted from the crown molding to the kitchen backsplash. She touched the edge of the counter with the tips of her fingers, as though afraid it might vanish if she pressed too hard. You've made this beautiful, she whispered. For a moment, I saw the mother I remembered from childhood, the one who smoothed my hair before piano recitals, who brought ginger ale when I was sick. We brewed coffee together, and as we sat in my kitchen, the sunlight painted her face in golden stripes through the blinds. I owe you an apology, she said at last. Your father and I doubted you. We shouldn't have. You proved us wrong. Her words pierced deeper than she knew. I'd been waiting for that acknowledgement since I was 12 years old, when Jake got a medal for participation and I got silence for excellence. When she rose to leave, I hesitated, then reached for the small silver key I'd carried on my ring for weeks. Here, I said, pressing it into her palm. If I ever go out of town, maybe you could water the plants. Just check on things. Her hand closed around it, warm and trembling. Of course. That simple act, handing over the key, felt like trust reborn. Yet, as her car pulled away, an unease lingered, faint but insistent, like a note slightly off-key in a familiar song. Weeks passed. Mom stopped by occasionally with groceries or to help me cook dinner. Sometimes she came just to sit with me, sipping tea in the living room while I worked on design sketches. Jake, on the other hand, grew distant. His texts trickled into silence. Sarah never reached out at all. My father stayed neutral, floating in the background, like an accountant balancing books that never added up. I should have been relieved. Instead, I felt the weight of the silence, like a storm gathering at the edge of the horizon. Then came the phone call. Mom again, her voice wrapped in careful sweetness. Honey, it's been too long since we had a proper family dinner. Why don't you come this Saturday? Something in her tone prickled my instincts, but I agreed. Maybe enough time had passed. Maybe we could act normal again. Saturday evening, I pulled into their driveway. Through the front window, I saw Jake and Sarah already at the table. Of course. They were always there, orbiting my parents like moons that refused to leave their planet. When I stepped inside, Jake greeted me with exaggerated cheer. Claire, great to see you. His grin was too wide, the kind he wore when he wanted something. Sarah barely looked up from her plate. Dinner began in cautious politeness. Talk about weather, work, safe topics that skated the surface. Mom served her famous pot roast, and for a moment it felt almost normal. Almost. Then the shift came. Mom set her fork down and turned to me with that same gentle tone she'd used on the phone. "Claire, we need to talk to you about something." My stomach tightened. Jake leaned forward, nodding like a child rehearsing a line. "You know our lease is ending soon, with the economy the way it is, and with my hours being cut." He let the words hang in the air, weighted with helplessness. Mom picked it up smoothly. "We thought maybe, just temporarily, they could stay with you, just until things settle." The room froze around me. My pulse pounded in my ears. "I don't want anyone else living in my house," I said, my voice steady. Dad frowned. "Claire, this isn't just anyone. This is your brother and his wife." "I understand," I said, "but the answer is still no." Sarah finally looked up, her lips curling. "I knew you'd be greedy, arrogant." I stared at her, heat crawling up my neck. "Funny. At my housewarming, you called it a pigsty. Now you're eager to move in?" Her eyes flashed, but she masked it with a shrug. "If it's free, I can deal with it." The audacity stole my breath. "Maybe," I said carefully, "if money's tight, you could get a job instead of pretending to be a blogger all day." Sarah's face ignited, and she shoved back from the table. "How dare you!" Her chair scraped against the hardwood, a sound like tearing metal. She stormed out, footsteps pounding up the stairs, to my old bedroom. Jake shot me a look of disgust. "You're unbelievable." Then he bolted after her. The silence that followed was worse than the shouting. My parents sat across from me, disappointment etched in their faces as though I'd betrayed them, not the other way around. I finished my meal in small, stiff bites, the roast turning to ash in my mouth. Then I excused myself, my voice flat. As I drove home, the night pressed heavy against the windshield. For the first time, I realized something chilling. It wasn't just that Sarah wanted to live in my house. It wasn't even that Jake needed rescuing. It was the way my parents had spoken, like this was inevitable, like my no had never mattered. And as I replayed the moment my mother's fingers closed over that silver key, the unease inside me sharpened into something darker. Because maybe, just maybe, that dinner wasn't a request. It was a warning. When I woke Tuesday morning, the sky was the color of steel, heavy with rain. A client had canceled last minute, which gave me a free afternoon, rare, unexpected, almost suspiciously timed. By 11:30, I decided to drive home, grab some files, and work there. As I turned into my street, I noticed 2 cars parked out front, my parents' sedan and Jake's scuffed hatchback. For a second, I thought something terrible had happened. Why else would they all be here? But then I noticed the blinds drawn upstairs, shadows moving, voices muffled but urgent. The instant I stepped through the door, my stomach dropped. My hallway was clogged with furniture, my dresser, my nightstands, even the bedside lamps I'd chosen so carefully. The air stank of paint. I took the stairs 2 at a time, heart thudding like a drum. And there they were, my parents, Jake, Sarah, 2 strangers, in paint-splattered overalls. And my bedroom walls, my beautiful, calm gray, were being smothered under thick coats of bubblegum pink. Sarah stood in the middle like a queen surveying her kingdom, hands on hips, a satisfied smile stretching her lips. "Oh, good, you're here," she said, as if I'd been late to my own meeting. "We decided to start renovating before Jake and I move in. Isn't it perfect?" For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My chest burned, as though the walls themselves were collapsing inward. "Stop!" My voice cracked like a whip. The workers froze mid-roll, exchanging nervous glances. Sarah tilted her head, mock innocence dripping from every word. "What's the matter? It needed color." I turned to my mother. "How did you even get in here?" She held up the key I had given her. Her face twitched with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Honey, we're family. We knew you'd want them comfortable." Dad added, "You always come around, Claire. You do the right thing." The right thing? My hands shook. The right thing was to barge into my house and repaint my bedroom? The one I spent weeks perfecting? Jake stepped forward, palms raised. "Claire, listen, we didn't mean—" "No, you meant exactly this." My voice climbed. "Get out, all of you, now." The workers, bless them, didn't need telling twice. They dropped their brushes, muttered apologies, and practically bolted down the stairs. Sarah, though, wasn't finished. "You're overreacting. We're family. Families share." "No, families respect each other. You," I jabbed a finger toward her, "don't even know what that means." Her smirk faltered, but only for a second. This room will be mine anyway. Might as well get a head start. That was the last straw. Get out of my house, or I swear I'll drag you out myself. The silence was absolute. Then, one by one, they filed out. My parents first, shaking their heads in disapproval. Jake followed, shame clinging to his shoulders. Sarah lingered in the doorway, her eyes gleaming with defiance, before she finally stomped away. I sank onto the stripped mattress, staring at the crime scene they'd left behind. Half the walls were still my serene gray, the other half screamed in shrill pink. My sanctuary had been defiled. Rage fueled me into action. I called Mike, a contractor friend who lived nearby. Change every lock, tonight. It's an emergency. He arrived within the hour, tools in hand, expression grim when I explained. While he worked, I drove to the hardware store, bought gallons of paint, rollers, tarps. By 9, I was alone in that desecrated room, the smell of primer burning my nose. Each stroke of gray swallowed the pink. My muscles ached, sweat ran down my back, but I didn't stop. At midnight, I was still rolling. At 1, I was detailing the edges with a brush, teeth gritted. By 2, every wall gleamed the right color again. But I couldn't bring myself to sleep in that room. Not yet. The ghost of their intrusion lingered in the air, sour and heavy. I collapsed in the guest room, staring at the ceiling until dawn bled through the blinds. The next morning, while dragging my dresser back into place, I found something wedged between the boards of the floor. A folded piece of paper, faint smears of paint across the corner. I opened it. It was a mood board. Cutouts of pastel cribs, plush rugs, influencer-style decor, all curated into a nursery inspiration collage. At the bottom, scribbled in Sarah's handwriting, content calendar, move-in reveal, nursery tour, sponsored brand collab. My blood ran cold. This hadn't been desperation. This had been strategy. She wasn't just angling for a free place to live. She was setting up her empire, using my house as her stage. By noon, the locks were all replaced. Every door, every window, even the garage. The workers had cleared out, the walls restored, the furniture returned. From the outside, my home looked the same as it had before. But something had shifted inside me. This wasn't just about Sarah anymore. It wasn't even about Jake. My parents had stood there, complicit, believing they had the right to decide what happened inside walls I alone had paid for. And I realized, with a clarity that hurt like glass in my chest, I could no longer trust them. Not any of them. The house smelled of paint and betrayal. For days, I walked past the master bedroom with a knot in my stomach, as if Sarah's laughter still clung to the walls I'd repainted. I told myself the locks would be enough, but doubt itched beneath my skin. One spare key had been enough to invite chaos. What if there were copies? So I called a security company. 2 men in navy polos arrived with boxes of equipment. Cameras, motion sensors, an alarm system that chimed with every door and window. They paced the perimeter with me, measuring, marking, drilling. When they were done, my phone buzzed with an app that gave me control over every square foot of my property. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could exhale. That relief lasted 2 days. It was late morning at the office, and I was sketching a floor plan when my phone vibrated violently. Motion detected. Front door. My chest tightened. I tapped the notification, and the live feed blinked to life. There was Jake standing on my porch, fumbling with a key. My key. I watched, frozen, as he jammed it into the lock. He twisted, jiggled, cursed under his breath. The lock didn't budge. His jaw tightened. He looked around, eyes darting to the street like a thief checking for witnesses. Then he left the frame. A moment later, he returned with a crowbar. My breath caught. He wedged it into the doorframe, muscles straining as he tried to pry it open. The alarm shrieked, flashing red lights across the porch. Jake's face twisted in panic. He dropped the crowbar, stumbled back, and sprinted to his car. Tires screeched, and he was gone. For a long time, I sat at my desk, staring at the screen. The video replayed in my mind, his hand on my door, his eyes wild, the crowbar gleaming. My own brother. By afternoon, I was at the police station. I showed the footage to the officer at the front desk. His brows arched. That's clear as day. You want to press charges? My voice felt foreign, steady in a way I didn't expect. Yes, attempted breaking and entering. They filed the report, took the footage, promised to be in touch. I drove home numb, the world around me dulled. I'd thought Sarah was the hurricane. I hadn't expected Jake to be the one holding the crowbar. The phone calls began that evening. First my mother, her voice a storm. "Claire, what have you done? The police came to our house. They arrested your brother." "He tried to break into my home," I said. Calm, detached. I had proof. Her voice broke. "You're destroying this family. How could you do this to your own brother?" "Maybe my brother shouldn't have tried to pry my door open like a burglar." She wept. "Drop the charges, please, Claire, please." Next was my father. Less anger, more calculation. Think carefully. A criminal record will ruin his career. You can't want that on your conscience. Then Jake himself, his voice desperate. "I messed up, okay? Just drop it, please. I swear I'll never come near your house again." And Sarah, though she never called, texted me a string of venom. "Selfish, heartless. You'll regret this. Hope you sleep well, knowing you ruined your own brother's life." For the first time, her words didn't sting. They rolled off me like rain on glass. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, the glow of the security app lighting my face, and made a decision. When Mom called again, still begging, I cut her off. "I'll withdraw the complaint, but only on one condition." She breathed. "You all leave me alone. No more visits, no more surprises, no more trying to move into my house. You stay out of my life." Silence hummed on the line, thick and hesitant. Then she whispered, "Yes. Yes, of course. Whatever you want." The next morning, I went to the station and signed the withdrawal. Jake was released with a warning. I thought I'd feel lighter, but what settled over me was something different. A hollow quiet. For weeks afterward, my phone was eerily still. No calls, no texts, no invitations to Sunday dinners. The silence stretched so long it became a kind of exile. Part of me mourned it. The other part reveled in it. I poured my energy into work, into repainting the hallway, into tending the backyard until it looked like a sanctuary. I invited friends over for dinners, filled the rooms with laughter that belonged to me. But sometimes, late at night, I'd replay Mom's frantic words. "We can't lose everything over this. Not we can't lose Jake, not we can't lose family. Everything." And I began to wonder what everything really meant. 6 months slid by in silence. Not the peaceful kind, not entirely. It was the silence of absence, of being erased. No texts from Dad reminding me to file my taxes early. No quick pings from Jake asking if I'd seen the latest show. No Sunday dinners where pot roast perfume filled the air and tension simmered under it. Instead, I built my own routines. Friday nights with coworkers, swapping design horror stories over wine. Saturday mornings in the backyard, hands deep in soil, coaxing life from the earth. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, I'd sprawl on the patio with a sketchbook, drawing outlines of renovations I might never do, just because I could dream them. I told myself I was fine, better even. But exile has sharp edges. One ordinary Tuesday, I ran into my cousin Lisa in the grocery store. We'd always gotten along. She was blunt but kind, the sort of person who'd tell you when you had spinach in your teeth and then buy you gum to make up for it. She gasped when she saw me. "Claire! Oh my God, how are you? It feels like forever." She hugged me right there between the cereal and canned goods. We chatted about work, about her kids, about the weather, safe ground. Then she tilted her head. "So, I heard Jake and Sarah moved in with your parents." My stomach clenched. "Did they?" "Yeah, your mom told mine. Said Sarah's pregnant." Lisa lowered her voice, as though sharing a secret too fragile to speak aloud. "That must be exciting for everyone." Pregnant. The word echoed like a dropped coin in an empty room. I managed to smile. "Exciting," I repeated, though my chest tightened. Lisa frowned. "She also said Jake's job still hasn't picked up. They're struggling, but your parents seem happy to help." I nodded, making non-committal noises, refusing to let the story spill right there in the aisle. We parted with promises to get coffee soon, promises we both knew would linger unfulfilled. But as I drove home, the words gnawed at me. Pregnant, struggling, living under my parents' roof. For the first time since I'd changed the locks, guilt crept in. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, the house too quiet around me, and thought about my brother. I remembered when we were kids, how he'd sneak into my room at night during thunderstorms, dragging his blanket like a security cape. How I'd let him curl up on the floor beside my bed, even when I complained. But I also remembered the years that followed, Dad bailing him out of one failed job after another, Mom smoothing over his mistakes, Jake learning to lean instead of stand, and Sarah, always polished, always performing, chasing sponsorships that evaporated as quickly as they appeared. Now there was a baby coming, and my parents were carrying not just their weight, but his too. Again. Did I feel guilty for not helping? Maybe. But mostly I felt relieved. Relieved that the chaos was no longer mine to manage. A week later, a letter arrived addressed to Resident Ellison Household. I nearly tossed it with the junk mail until I noticed the fine print. Prenatal offers for new mothers. My fingers stiffened. Another envelope followed the next day, this one congratulating new homeowners at my street number. I opened it. Inside was a flyer from a realtor, wishing Jake and Sarah luck on their recent move. Heat flared in my chest. Someone was playing with addresses. I pictured Sarah's manicured nails typing in forms online, redirecting mail, seeding the paperwork trail that could one day suggest they belonged here. That night I tossed both letters into the trash. But an hour later, I fished them out again, smoothed the creases, and laid them flat on the counter. Proof. The kind you don't think you'll need until you do. I tried to shake it off, but the unease grew. Every creak in the house made me glance at the cameras. Every unfamiliar car on the street set my teeth on edge. I told myself I was imagining things, but the pit in my stomach knew better. Because this wasn't over. Jake and Sarah hadn't just been trying to move into my house. They were already laying foundations, on paper, in whispers, in subtle manipulations that tied them to it, and I couldn't shake the sense that my parents knew more than they were letting on. The first knock came on a Thursday morning. I'd been working late the night before, hunched over blueprints, so the sound jarred me awake. Through the peephole, I saw a man in a city inspector's jacket holding a clipboard. "Morning, ma'am. We got an anonymous report about unpermitted renovations on your property." For a heartbeat, I thought I'd misheard. "What?" He showed me the form. Someone had filed a complaint. The address was mine. The handwriting in the notes section was jagged, almost theatrical. I steadied my voice. "All my permits are in order. Want to see them?" We walked through the house together. I showed him the signed electrical clearances, the roofing approval, every receipt neatly filed in a binder. He flipped through, his frown softening. "Everything looks good," he admitted. "Sorry to bother you. Sometimes these tips are personal." I forced a smile, but my hands trembled as I shut the door behind him. Personal. I didn't need to guess who had filed it. A week later, my inbox pinged with a notification from the utility company. Confirmation of service transfer request. My eyes narrowed. I hadn't requested anything. The email listed new account holders, Jake and Sarah. I called immediately, voice tight. "That's fraud. Keep everything in my name. Flag the account." The operator assured me they would. Still, dread pooled in my chest. The next day, I found a postal slip jammed in my mailbox. Change of address processed. The forwarding request tied my address to Jake and Sarah's names. The paper shook in my hand. This wasn't sloppy, it was systematic. I snapped photos of everything, emailed copies to myself, printed extras, began a folder labeled Evidence. I couldn't keep guessing. So I drove to my parents' house. The moment I stepped inside, I knew. Baby supplies crowded the corners, boxes of diapers, a crib still in plastic wrap. Sarah lounged on the couch, hand resting on her small but visible bump. Jake stood nearby, arms crossed like a guard. Dad rose from his armchair, his face tight. "Claire, we weren't expecting you." I held out the postal slip. "Really? Because it looks like someone's been expecting me to disappear from my own address." Jake blinked. Sarah smirked faintly. "Clerical error," she said sweetly. My jaw clenched. "Don't insult me." I turned to Dad. "Was this you?" His silence was answer enough. Mom's eyes filled with tears. "Please, Claire, let us explain." "Explain why my utilities, my mail, my legal footprint are being rewritten in their names." Her hands fluttered uselessly. "It's not what you think." "Then what is it?" That was when Dad finally spoke. His voice was low, brittle. "The bank is pressing us. We took out a commercial loan years back, tied to Jake's employment history. With the layoffs, it looks unstable. If they think Jake's not settled, we lose refinancing. We could lose everything." His words landed like stones. Mom added softly, "If Jake looks like he has stable housing, with family, with the baby coming, the investors stay calm. We buy time." I stared at them. "So you decided to make my house his address, his stage, without asking." Dad's shoulders slumped, pride breaking in the weight of it. "We thought you'd come around. You always do. I laughed bitterly. Not this time. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, the evidence folder open beside me. Every letter, every email, every slip of paper screamed one truth. They would keep pushing until I drew blood with my boundaries. So I picked up the phone. The lawyer's voice was calm, professional. You did the right thing calling. We'll document everything. Cease and desist letters for the address fraud, a no trespass notice if needed. We'll build a paper trail. I exhaled slowly. For the first time, the fight shifted. It wasn't about arguments at dinner tables or paint wars in bedrooms anymore. It was about legality, about paper and proof, about standing my ground with more than anger. Because now I knew the truth. This had never been about family dinners or shared space. It had always been about leverage. And I would not be leveraged. The lawyer moved fast. Within a week, certified letters were drafted and sent, one to the utility company, one to the post office, one directly to Jake and Sarah, each a crisp warning with legal teeth. No address changes, no service transfers, no attempts to represent my property as theirs. Another letter went to my parents, a no trespass notice, formal and absolute. I signed each page with a steady hand, though inside I shook. This wasn't a spat anymore. It was war conducted on paper. 2 days later, Mom called. Her voice cracked. We got the letter. Yes, I said evenly. That was the point. Claire, please, it doesn't have to be this way. We're family. Family doesn't hijack mail. Family doesn't repaint bedrooms they don't own. Family doesn't use me as a shield for a bank deal. Silence. Then a sob. We were desperate. We thought we could fix everything before you found out. Her words scraped at my heart, but I stayed firm. No more behind my back, ever. If you want my help, you come to me honestly. A week later, I asked my parents to meet me at my house. Just them. No Jake, no Sarah. When they arrived, the air felt brittle, as if the walls themselves held their breath. I poured coffee and gestured for them to sit at the kitchen table. I'm not here to punish you, I began, but I am setting boundaries. From this moment forward, you have no keys, no access, no say in my home. You don't change addresses, utilities, or paperwork tied to me, ever. Dad's jaw tightened. You'd put it in writing rather than trust your own parents? Yes, I said quietly, because trust was already broken. His shoulders sagged. I continued, but I'm not heartless. Jake needs work. I can connect him with a contractor friend who's hiring, and when the baby comes, I'll contribute to a starter fund for essentials only. But it will go through a third party. No cash, no strings, just support for the child. Mom's eyes brimmed with tears. Thank you, she whispered. Dad's voice cracked. You're stronger than any of us. Maybe that's what scares us. For the first time, I saw not just my parents, but people, flawed, cornered, making desperate moves. It didn't excuse their choices, but it explained them. Weeks passed. Quiet returned. Jake did take the job lead I gave him, though pride kept him from telling me directly. Sarah, predictably, documented her pregnancy online from my parents' guest room, her pastel props crowding the background. The inspector case closed. No more anonymous complaints. No more clerical errors. The silence this time felt different. Not exile, not war, just space. One evening, I sat alone in my master bedroom, the walls the exact gray I had chosen months ago. I traced my fingers across the paint, remembering the night I'd fought until dawn to reclaim it. This room was mine. This house was mine. But more than that, this boundary was mine. I had drawn a line, and for once, no one had crossed it. I don't pretend it ended like a fairy tale. My parents and I still speak, though carefully, like people navigating a fragile bridge. I call on birthdays. They send photos when the baby arrives. I visit once, supervised, keeping my distance while holding that tiny, fragile life in my arms. Jake avoids my eyes. Sarah forces a smile, brittle as spun sugar. And that's fine. Because I finally understand something I should have learned years ago. Family doesn't mean surrender. Family doesn't mean giving up your walls, your keys, your life so others can feel comfortable. Sometimes choosing yourself looks selfish from the outside, but sometimes it's the only way to survive. And in the quiet of my gray-painted room, I know I would make the same choice again. Every time.